What's up, y'all? Welcome back, Pitchside with Parker, to a second edition of Pitchside Stories. It's been long awaited. I've thought a lot about who else I would love to bring onto the channel, and today we do have an awesome guest. He is a beat writer for the Tennessean, where he covers Nashville SC in MLS. He's a proud Oregon Duck. He was briefly a Northwestern Wildcat, where we crossed paths a little bit, and he's also a Bayern fan. He is currently one of 5 Black newspaper writers covering MLS, and he's one of the young stars in the soccer media industry for sure. So today we're going to hear a little bit more about his story. Drake Hills, welcome to the channel, man. Thanks for being here.
Yo, Parker, man, that's one of the best intros I've ever seen, I've ever heard, I've ever witnessed. Man, I appreciate the love. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no problem, man. Look, you got to make the guests feel comfortable. You got to give them the confidence off the bat. So
yeah, I feel that.
So yeah, man, we're definitely gonna kind of jump into your soccer story, because that's what this series is all about. Just hearing American soccer stories. Like, we all have one, and I think the essence of being a soccer fan in America is that they're all very different. You know, we don't all just grow up loving it. But that's where I'll start with you. You know, where did you grow up? How did you first get into soccer? What were your influences?
It's an interesting story because it really takes place in 2 different settings at the same time, in 2 different locations, where at one point you have my roots, my Southern roots, and which really brought me back to Nashville and where I am now. My Southern roots, and that's where I found soccer. So I when I was about 2-3 years old in Augusta, Georgia, I was growing up. Our little apartment was down the street from Augusta National, where everyone likes to go on to ESPN and watch the Masters every spring. And at that point in time, I was discovering the game for my own. Of course, my parents put me in everything, but I always gravitated towards soccer. It was something about it that identified with me, not identified with my parents or identified with my family. I'm the only soccer fan in my family.
Wow.
I'm blessed to have a God family who, is really a soccer lineage bloodline, where, the dad, who is my godfather, he played soccer in college in West Virginia. And then, of course, his son, my godbrother, he played at Cal State Fullerton. But before that, he actually started at Cal State Bakersfield and was really the generation that came in before many American soccer fans know who Giassi Zardes is. So that was a guy who, that's the type of level that my godbrother was on. He was playing in that type of field in the Big West Conference out there in California. So, but still, I mean, soccer was my sport. And as I got older, I started playing, kind of at the beginning levels of competitive. When I moved to San Diego, that's where I settled down into 2 sports. I played basketball and soccer simultaneously. I would have training 2 days a week, plus training on the weekends. So basically 3 days a week. And then on the other days, I would have basketball practice and or games. So my schedule was pretty packed. And unfortunately, as I got probably towards the middle school age, I actually had to make a choice, both because of finances, but also because my grades were pretty terrible. Now, at least aside from playing, let me catch you up on and what culturally was going on. That's when we're talking about middle school for me, which is usually that late 2000s era, where you started seeing Manchester United become really like that next generation, right? It wasn't the David Beckhams and the Roy Keanes and the Giggs and the Scholes and all those guys, right? Nicky Butt and everybody.
Yeah.
Van der Sar. It wasn't, Ruud van Nistelrooy. It wasn't those guys anymore. It was, Scholes was still around, Giggs was around, and Rooney was much older. But now you have Ronaldo, you have Carlos Tevez, you have, Rio Ferdinand is a little bit older now, right? I mean,
everybody's favorite team, right?
Yeah, I mean that late 2000, that 08 Man United, right? You got to throw in Tim Howard eventually.
Yeah, man.
And so that's around the time where I really started paying attention to European soccer, because before that I really wasn't watching. I was just playing, and so I started to gravitate towards that. And I think my first World Cup that I really paid attention to was 06, and I really gravitated towards France because not just Zinedine Zidane, the whole headbutt thing in the final. That wasn't really what what got me. It was actually just the fact that me as a Black man, seeing other Black players play. And of course, as I mentioned, you had Ferdinand, you had other guys on that Man United team, but I really didn't see myself in the game,
For
so
sure.
that's, and when I was in my early teens, that's where I really started to see other Black players, and started to see folks who were passionate about the game just as I was, who looked like me, and I thought that was pretty cool. um, and also I started begin to see the really just the different lifestyle that it had versus in the basketball world or in the football world. It was like this separate world that was a lot more relaxed, a lot more uh, globally acceptive. It was more
Universal.
yeah, it was universal, but it was more flamboyant in a way, I think. As football, oftentimes you get a little more uh, push on the nationalistic lunch pail, gritty, hardcore type. There was this
Sure.
elegance to the game that I really appreciated. So going back to my actual playing career, I actually had to make a choice when I was about 13, 12 or 13 years old. And unfortunately, because, clubs were around, $1,200, $1,300 a month for, payment.
Oh yeah.
And on top of that, you had to think like just being someone in that type of experience, right? In that type of environment where I didn't see myself and the opportunity to be accepted culturally, to have a pipeline, to see myself get better and rise to the top. I didn't see that. And on top of that, the expenses. So I actually decided that I was going to stick with basketball. And, when you start talking about my story, it's almost like this, it's interesting. It's almost like this ex-girlfriend that you have where it's like, dang, man, I shouldn't have
Oh
broke
man.
up with her, man. I shouldn't have done that. And like now she's glowing up and she's on a new level now, but you're always peeking and seeing what she's doing. And so after, even though I stopped playing soccer, like I always watched soccer. I was always following what was going on, whether it be World Cups, whether it be Euros. Um, and I started really getting involved with FIFA, man. My FIFA career really took off. Like
Of course.
I want to say like FIFA. I was playing, of course, before that, but I want to say like FIFA 12 was like when
Okay.
my FIFA career really took off. Because I had been playing FIFA since '03, but 12 is when I really started like putting in 6 to 8 hours a day
What were you playing? Was it career
on the
mode,
weekends.
ultimate team?
I'm definitely a career mode guy. I didn't get into the foot life until FIFA 17,
Okay.
16 or 17. So but yeah, I mean, even though I stopped playing and you start looking at the 2010s, like that's when I started
It
to
was
look
that
at,
flame on the side.
yeah, like I started to have more interest outside of actually playing or watching. Like I started looking at fashion different. Like these are some of the things that still have me gravitate towards the game today, which is like I love the fashion regeneration of the soccer world. How Nike pretty much reinvented what I think they skimmed over. That when you start talking about the tracksuits and the trainers and some of the, like really the total 90 line is kind of like being re-implemented with like the Predators, and not the Predators, the Phantoms, and how they've continued to reinvigorate Tiempo fans. Like if you've got some R10 boots anywhere, like everyone knows the R10, the white and gold ones,
Oof.
right? That came in like the late
Of
2000s.
course, man. Of
Like those are
course.
still being reinvented, and I think Nike has done a great job with that. And I also love just the off the field fashion that comes with it. The tracksuits. I really appreciate some of the more street culture that's been involved in the game, as opposed to just this gentleman, sport, or really just like this high and uptight feel to it. That's what I love about the soccer culture. And it's a more of a fishing hook now, where you're using that to garner more interest with the game. So that's what kept me, you know, gravitating towards soccer throughout the years. And once I got into college, I realized that, um, for me, like soccer was always going to be there, but how can I make it something that I can benefit from in a career? And writing just came along as something that a teacher said to me in in high school, my senior year, just saying, hey, you're a really good creative writer. You got to work on your mechanics, but you're someone who really has great ideas, and it's astounding in some ways. And so I put two and two together, and next thing you know, I was at Oregon trying to figure out how to become a soccer journalist.
For sure, man. Nah, I totally hear it, because I think what you said earlier about that whole, like, it's almost like your ex.
Yeah.
You're thinking about it, but you're not.
Like you want to go back to playing and doing all that stuff, but you don't. Sometimes you don't really have to, because there's so much involved around that where you can still be involved.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, I felt that way too a little bit. Like, I think in high school, I was always so inundated with that. Everybody talking about football, everybody talking about basketball. And like you said, it's such a social thing,
Right.
being with your friends and what your friends are doing, what your friends are talking about. And, my friends were always into soccer, even the people on the soccer team. And so, but going back and finding that later, it can be a really beautiful thing. So yeah, man, talk about a little bit, like, being at Oregon. How did you develop that? Because you say you figured it out. You're like, okay, I've got the writing talent. I have this love for soccer. How did you work towards that? And for the young journalists out there and whoever else might be watching this.
Man, I'm sure a lot want some sort of magic answer to it, but it's trial and error. That's how it happens. Trial and error. Lots of trials and lots of errors. And you can't have one if you don't have the other. You can't expect to have all of these great accomplishments if you haven't had errors before, because truly that is the best teacher. I got my trial and error by actually going to the Department of Athletics and doing a little bit more calm stuff. Although it
Sure.
was an interesting role where I was given the opportunity to, through some networking, uh, long story short, Willie Taggart comes in as head coach of the Oregon football team. And this is interesting, and I'll tie it to soccer in a way where this is interesting how, of course, at that college or pro level, when you have a new head coach, you're bringing in an entirely different staff, right? New positional coaches, new quality control from the top down. You're bringing a completely new staff in. And at that time, there's also some changeover and some transitions at the AD level and the associate AD level. And I actually, through as vice president on campus at the University of Oregon, referred me to an associate AD. And I got invited to this welcome party for Taggart's arrival as Oregon football coach. So I meet with him. His name is Craig Penton. He's now at LMU. And I started talking to him about my ideas with soccer. Like, hey, these are some of the stories that I really want to tell. I think it would be beneficial for the Oregon women's soccer program. They're going up against UCLA and USC. And, the reason why that's important is because USC had actually won the national championship that year, College Cup. And they're going to be at Stanford, right? All these national team product, national team product programs. And so he says, I'm going to, relay you to our writer, our beat writer for Oregon Athletics. And so that's how I actually got in. So I actually got a chance to be like a beat writer for Oregon women's soccer while, really everyone else was doing more social media, a little more marketing. Like I was actually writing stories. I was writing gamers. I wrote like a midweek feature every week. And it gave me some of my early steps on what it would be like covering one team, right? Where you're setting up your budget, right? You're talking about what you're going to be writing, just getting not just the writing experience, but like getting that experience to know what a budget is, what what a coverage plan is, right? When you sit down before a season starts, okay, how are we going to cover this club? How are we going to write about them throughout the season? What stories do we want to tell? How are we going to engage the audience? So some of those things are what you're thinking about as a beat writer, but I didn't know that at the time. So I was glad that I got that experience. And for those who are wanting to do that, I think, at the college level, look, college programs aren't covered daily, right? I mean, unless you're Georgetown or Maryland, you're not getting covered by a paper significantly. And so
Right.
A lot of programs there are, whether it's the campus paper or if your college program is good and the local paper in the city is interested on saying, hey, like this team just made it to Big Ten conference tournament final, or they just qualified for their first college cup. Like some of those things where you can grab onto those opportunities, but it all starts with trial and error.
Yeah, man, getting your foot in the door is heavily underrated. You got to try something to know if it's for you or not. Like
Yeah.
I had a similar experience, but it turned me in a different direction. Doing some, like, did an internship and got an experience as a beat writer, and I was like, man, this is not exactly what I thought it was. It's like you're saying, there's so many other things beyond just writing the same, writing the game stories and interviewing the players and stuff. But your job primarily is as a reporter, is as a
Right.
beat reporter. And I wanted to, pick your mind a little bit on the experiences that you've had, because, man, you had a crazy year to start your first MLS season as the beat reporter for Nashville SC. We got a global pandemic. We got the summer of, protests and
Yep.
just the national awakening around racial injustice and how that infiltrated every aspect of everybody's life,
Yep.
but especially on the field as well. I know you were involved in telling some of those stories. Take me back, man. Take me back to last March. Like, did you get to go to some games and cover some games before the actual shutdown happened? And then what was the actual process when it got shut down? Because I think we all have a story about that, right?
It was only one. I only got a chance to, as far as the regular season is concerned, I only got a chance to see the first match, and that was at home against Atlanta United, 2-1 loss, 59,000 plus at Nissan Stadium, which is where the Tennessee Titans play in the NFL. And of course, that was a great environment, but I really struggled to feel what that meant, because everything about the buildup was just as important. And when you talk about being a reporter, that is one of the most like definitive times for me in trying to articulate what a reporter is like. I mean, that day I must have been up at 6:30. I was ready to go by 7:30. I was out somewhere by 8. Well, I went to the newsroom first, and I had an advanced story. So pretty much like a story that was prepped to go into the paper on Sunday because it was a Saturday night kickoff. And so I was working on that. Then I went to this community MLS Works event, which is basically like this foundation, kind of like an NBA Cares.
Right.
If you're familiar with the NBA and with basketball, that ended up being the centerpiece for Monday's paper, but that was like the big piece to go before the game. And meanwhile, I'm still getting reports from sources telling me about, okay, what's the ticket count right now? Because that was the big thing. Like, are they going to break the record, which they eventually did, as far as a soccer game at Nissan Stadium?
Right.
So I was getting, reports from that. So I was on Twitter, refresh. Then I was, getting text messages. So there's more reports. And then after that, I had to do another story about the supporters. What was it like? Tailgating, fans chanting, fans marching into the stadium. I wrote a story about that in my car. Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah, I've been there.
in my car. And not only was I on deadline, but I was on a second deadline that came before that, because I don't know what car y'all be driving, but my car doesn't have an AC outlet. So I had pretty much until my battery was going to die and to file the story. So I was definitely going to beat that print deadline, because I didn't have a choice. So
Yeah.
so then I had that story, and then I finally got a chance to get into the stadium, get to my seat.
Right.
And then I had a trending file to write, and then on top, trending story, which is basically something that happens during the match. And then on top of that, then you have the observations file, which is like the new gamer, right? It's the new game story. And then I have a sidebar after that. So,
oh man,
I think I got, and then we had to do like a reaction video down on the field. So I think I got home probably around like, oh man, it must have been 11:30, 12:30 in the morning. So yeah, that's how some of those big days work. But that's what a reporter is. And so, yeah, being an MLS reporter in the first year, that was just the beginning, right? That was the first game that I ever been to. I was shut down to go to the second match, which was the last match before the pandemic hit, March 8th at Portland Timbers. And being an Oregon Duck, that would have been a true blessing because I've been to Portland Timbers matches before,
Mm-hmm.
but I had never been as a member of the media. So yeah, that would have been awesome. But it was a whirlwind from there, man. I don't know if you want to keep going into the tales of 2020, but yeah, pretty much from that point on, it was a test, and obviously and constantly challenging me about whether I really wanted to do this or not.
Can you explain some of that?
Yeah, I mean, going into the build up towards the MLS's back tournament, right? There was so much excitement about teams finally being able to get back into the swing of things, and of course, you had the outbreak with Nashville SC, um, pretty much in 9 different players catching cases of the coronavirus, and that was a nationally led storyline that was constantly being updated. You know, one day it was 2, the next day it was 3, then it was 5 at one point, and then for a couple of days it was a matter of, will Nashville SC be, get kicked out of the tournament, because at that point FC Dallas was kicked out or was withdrawn because they also had a COVID outbreak in their team. They had 11 people. So as that tournament went on, I began to see myself kind of struggle with what I was doing and what really mattered in my coverage. I started to find trouble engaging with the Nashville SC supporters and the audience, with sports fans in Tennessee who weren't necessarily soccer fans, but we were trying to get them curious about this new team, right? And in that, it was like, man, I don't even have time to be a soccer fan or a soccer consumer because I'm just constantly trying to report. And there wasn't really a lot of buzz. It was like trying to hold up the party. It was like having a house party and you're constantly seeing people leave the house and you're not seeing a lot of folks pull up to the doorway. So it was a challenge where you're trying to keep the DJ spinning,
Yeah.
you're refilling the drinks, all the snacks, you're making sure the snack bowl is always full. And like you're doing everything you can while like every couple of minutes there's 2 people leaving, then 3 people, then there's 1 person leaves. And the next thing you know, it's just like the people that helped you set up the stuff for the party that was there, no one else. That's how it felt, so it was tough.
Looking
And
around the room like Fresh
yeah,
Prince.
yeah, exactly. And so as you got into the restart, once you get into August, when teams are back playing again, it was like I was just a machine. I was like constantly writing these observation files and writing like these quick preview features for like trying to, what you call an advance. And it was tough because it was like, this is not what I want to do. Like I'm just doing it because I think that it's right, not because I know that it's right, and not because it feeds me by any means. It was like an empty feeling, you know? And if you talk to any soccer writer around the world, like they're fed by the soccer story. They are fed by the new buzz, the new talk of the town, and they're fed by informing others. And they're fed by telling these stories that really matter to the audience that they're telling them to. And I found myself not being able to tell those stories because I was like on a treadmill that wouldn't turn off. So yeah, sometimes it's a challenge. MLS reporting, in the great words of another Medill Wildcat, someone who has really mentored me since I came into the business, is Paul Tenorio. And I was on the phone with Paul. I think it was the day between Nashville SC had a match, and they were in this road stint where I just finally sat down on my couch and I took a breath. I called Paul, and one of the things he said, he was like, MLS beat writing is a grind, man. And I just remember that phase. It's that phrase to this day is still in my head. It's a grind. And so when you're in it, you're like, oh man, I don't know if I can do this. And then when you're not in it, when in the off season, you're like, man, I'm tired of like having to help out with some other stuff. I'm ready to write soccer again.
Yeah.
So it's always grass is looking greener on the other side.
That's a great way to kind of transition into just moving forward. Like, we are two young people in the soccer media space in the US, and you talk about these struggles and these barriers. And at the same time, I feel like there's a lot of opportunity. And so I'm curious, just maybe it could be for you personally, things you're looking to do, or just how you see it going in general. But what do you see as the future here? And what do you think are a few things that could help kind of move soccer more into the mainstream, where you don't have to be constantly fighting for that attention?
Well, it's going to take a lot of hands in the bucket to, in the bowl, in the bucket, whatever you want to call it, to create something that is internationally known, which is a multitude of things. The US men's national team having success in the next two World Cups, especially in 2026. And I know that seems like a far ways away, but we are not the 2014 US men's national team anymore. So
No chance, man. Oh,
yeah.
hey, look, I don't know when this is coming out, but we at least got the friendly from Jamaica behind us.
Yeah, indeed, indeed.
Serginho Dest. I've never seen a player like that in the Stars and Stripes.
Yeah. So there is international success as far as your national team. And then of course, we're going to have more talent in the domestic league. It's just that simple. Whether it's bringing in foreign players that are still in their prime, and on top of that, it's also having some of these national team stars play in MLS. And it's unfortunate because we have this catch-22, because you want those players to develop and go play in Europe, like a Pulisic or a Tyler Adams or a Josh Sargent. Weston McKennie is somebody who obviously started like Tyler Adams, in an MLS academy, and got an opportunity early to go over to Europe. Starts in Germany. Really a return for him because he lived there for a while because his parents were in the military. And then he's at one of the super clubs in the world, at Juventus. Americans haven't seen that before.
Right.
But they also need to see someone like Weston McKennie playing for their team that is down the street at the local stadium. Like, they've got to have both. It's got to be both for the game to really grow, so that respect can grow with it.
So my last question, this is something that, I mean, I've only really ever had one other guest on the show, but it's something that I would always like to ask people for sure. Is one of my central missions on the channel is flipping soccer coverage on its head. That's why the person doing the bicycle kick in my logo, right? I want to see things done a little bit differently when it comes to American soccer media. I wonder do you have anything that you see in the way that soccer is covered, as somebody who's really in depth with it, certainly far more than I am right now? What is your inside view of some of the issues with the way that soccer is covered, and what are some things that you are trying to do to kind of change that landscape?
There are so many different things. Since we're talking about
Get some stuff off your chest, Drake.
Since we're talking about the internal aspect of things, the internal POV, don't be lazy to hire actual soccer writers instead of someone who can just be a soccer writer. Actually hire somebody who knows the game. Actually hire somebody who knows how to reach soccer fans in your audience, to reach those who you want to be reading your stories or viewing your production. Don't hire somebody within your own newsroom if they don't know what soccer is. And I don't mean, because there have been some new folks that have been hired that were already on the inside, that are great people, and I don't mean to step on their toes, because I'm sure that they will do the beat justice. But it really matters to players, to coaches, to soccer fans already, who may not be MLS fans, but they're international fans, they're Premier League fans, they're La Liga fans, they're they might even be college soccer fans because their family grew up in that space, playing club and all that stuff, but they're just not interested in MLS. To gain their respect is to actually invest in one of their own. And it's the same thing with with your writing. You have to write to your audience first, and then you have to figure how to grow everyone else. You have to feed who is already at the table first. And so that's one thing. Um, Now, looking at an external view, I would like to challenge MLS as a league, and particularly the communication side, and how they are allowing clubs, and how clubs are shoving away the reporters who actually care to cover their clubs, and how they're wanting to hold close to every single piece of news that they have, as if they have been a club that has been in their city for 100 years. Doesn't make sense to me that a club will just move in. Was Yeah, the soccer fans were asking for it, but these football fans and hockey fans and baseball fans don't care about you. So you have to show them that you will give them something that they didn't know they needed. And to do that, you have to be open. You have to meet them at their doorstep. You can't demand them to come to you. And local media, local journalism is the way to do that. We are the avenue to take your most meaningful product, right? And deliver it to Mr. Jones, who only cares about the NFL. And that's the point that really bothers me, is that MLS clubs are constantly snuffing and scoffing at local journalism. And they're only looking to do it at the ESPNs of the world and national outlets. And you're not going to grow MLS that way. It's not going to be legitimate. It's not going to be authentic. It's going to be forced, and it's going to be robotic if you don't. So that's another
Yeah,
problem.
because when is ESPN going to cover you? They're going to cover you during the World Cup?
Yeah, and it's when it's convenient, or when there's some sort of national story, like if you have some cultural phenomena going on in your club, whether it's a fan experience or it's a player that's getting interest from Europe, right? Or if it's some sort of citywide spectrum that has an effect on your soccer team, like that is the only way that you're going to get day to day. And that's what you need when you're a new team, or when you're a new sport to a city. You need day to day. You need constant reminding that, hey, we're here. That's what local journalism is for. And unfortunately, there isn't a whole lot of offering. There's a whole lot of rejecting from MLS clubs. Another thing is, I would love to see a more diversity in uh, just the different forms of perspective that you have in MLS media. You really have the same generation, the same culture. There's not a lot of hip hop culture. There's not a lot of I despise country music, but shoot, even people who are like just down home, down south country lover, soccer lovers.
Man,
Like
I know a few of them being from a
different
southern soccer city. Yeah, they're out
different
there.
perspective, different perspective. We need a lot more um Latin media coverage, as far as the main platform in an MLS market is concerned. Like, we need a lot more representation, um, uh, for them. Like, they need more opportunity. They deserve more opportunity. They have worked hard for more opportunity. And again, going back to the top platforms, the national platforms, they lack that as well. Um, and it's absurd at the local level. And then on top of that, I think you need a lot more of diversity in your decision makers, your editors, those who are overseeing reporters, who are overseeing um, folks that work for teams. I mean, even their hires are not diverse enough, because all the clubs, they're pretty much looking the same. I mean, Inter Miami might be a little bit different. They've obviously taken more of a Latin approach to things, which is absolutely needed. Um, Everyone else looks the same, you know, racially, culturally. uh, you know, in their own, they're born in the same age bracket. I mean, it's the same people. And so in order for the league to grow, I think all of those different facets need to change as well.
Yeah, and I think what it misses also is like it doesn't reflect the communities that they're a part of at all. Like there are
Absolutely
just
not.
completely
It only it
untapped
only it
and
only it only
disrespected markets.
it only reflects the suburban family that earns more than $150,000 a year, that has played club soccer all their life and can afford to pay $1,500 for kids to play soccer at a young age to travel the country. Like that's the only thing, and the only plus that has gone well is to cater to those people who, in a way, something tells me that the only reason why that they're there is because they were the stakeholders when the league was first founded. But when you're talking about league expansion, you're going into cities that have a lot less of those and a lot more people who actually just love the game, period. And they aren't here to give you the quaint family that lives in the suburbs, right? They're here to give you the rawness. They're here to give you that great, just that great experience of what exactly it is to be from such and such city, to love the beautiful game, and to show you what that clash looks like. But unfortunately, you're not catering to them. You're catering to yourself. You're catering to others who look like you and talk like you and walk like you, but just don't work for the club. Like that's the only difference, is that you're catering to an audience that don't work for you while you look just exactly like them. And that's the sad part.
Very, very true. I can't disagree with anything you're saying. But you know what? It brings us very beautifully full circle because look at you. You're a person who you said it at the beginning. You had to stop playing because of those fees and those extra barriers and everything. And now you're the voice of Nashville SC on the newspaper side. And you know, we're continuing to grow and continuing to change this whole media landscape. So I think that would be a great place to wrap up. I want to be conscious of your time, man, but I appreciate you so much for coming and speaking and just being honest and telling your stories. And we got to learn more about the Drake Hill soccer story, and I think that's a great thing, man. That's great. So thanks so much for being on this, and to everybody on YouTube, thank you for watching. Be sure to hit that like button if you didn't already. Subscribe to the channel if you're new, and go follow my boy Drake. Can you give him your socials for everybody?
Yes, of course, because I just launched this year. I have launched an Instagram account specifically catered towards soccer. It's at Drake Hill Soccer. It's plain and simple, DRAKEHILLS soccer, no caps. Then you got my Twitter, which is really where, of course, a lot of my coverage lies, at Live Life Drake. You'll find me. The blue checks are there. You just gotta follow, because I like talking to y'all. I love talking to y'all, as a matter of fact. So follow your boy on Twitter, follow your boy on Instagram, and of course, to read all my coverage, Tennessean.com/Nashville SC. You'll find everything you need.
Yeah, man. Go ahead and subscribe, support him, man. That's gonna help him out, just like we talked about throughout this entire video. So, yo, that's gonna be all for this one, y'all. Again, thank you so much for checking it out, and I will catch y'all in the next video. Peace.